Worst to Best is a series where I rank all weapons within a class after I've unlocked Forge Camo and have a considerable amount of experience with each weapon. And we're finally getting to the melee weapons, including the ones from Modern Warfare 2. And we're also going to be talking about zombies in this video. There are 3 melee weapons worth using. They're grouped together on this list, so zombies fans, listen up when we get to that section. Please don't forget to like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, you're welcome to leave your own worst to best list in the comments if you happen to disagree. The pickaxe will kick this list off at the number 10 spot. It is easily the worst melee option in Modern Warfare 3. The stats that set melee weapons apart are movement, lunge range, swing speed, and then finally you have TTK, and this is the time it takes between starting a melee and then getting a hit marker. It has not only a slow time to kill, as the slowest swing speed and notably slower movement speeds, which makes this feel like you're wielding a rod of lead when you're moving around with it. I feel like a tortoise when I'm using the pickaxe. It also uses a narrow cone angle. Now, I'm going to explain cone angle more later on in this video when I have a better example to show y'all, but cone essentially is the side-to-side hit detection you get in this game, and the pickaxes is narrow, which essentially means you have the least amount of side-to-side lunge range, which isn't good. The pickaxe is just worst in every way possible with no benefit to using it whatsoever. That's why it's easily the worst in this game. Next up at the number 9 spot, we have the dual Kamas. Overall, the dual Kamas are an average melee weapon. It has a slightly faster swing speed, but also a slightly slower time to kill that kind of balances it out. But it boils down to just being a basic knife, and they're slightly worse than the other average knives that are coming up on this list. Like our number 8 spot here, the gutter knife. Again, another average melee weapon. Something to add about these average melees is that they can feel great at times because there's nothing necessarily wrong with them, but there's plenty of times where I feel like my knife is in the enemy for a split second, but I still end up dying. Now, the gutter knife boasts the second fastest overall movement speed in game, which is nice, but unfortunately, there are other melee weapons that are faster and they feel better, or they just bring something more important to the table, in my opinion, which is why the gutter knife sits at the number 8 spot. The 7th best melee weapon on my list here is the Riot Shield. We all know what the Riot Shield is, right? It's a melee weapon that 2-hit kills in multiplayer, but its primary benefit is that it blocks bullets. You can use it to guard yourself or escort teammates from the front. You can have it tank bullets from you from the back, or to tank extra zombies hits. It's actually very useful for that in that mode. But it's overall pretty versatile. Just be aware the Riot Shield comes with a 10% overall movement penalty when you don't have it equipped. At the number 6 spot, we have the Tonfa. Now, zombies fans, here's your cue. Listen up. This is your section of the video for the next 3 melee weapons. In multiplayer, the Tonfa is a 2-hit kill, and the only 2-hit kill in multiplayer, other than the Riot Shield, of course. The Tonfa ends up taking about 300 milliseconds longer to kill than your average melee weapon. However, it has the longest lunge range at over 2.5 meters and a fast click to kill. So you can get some insane commando lunge with this that feels like you're teleporting towards the enemy. This allows you to close distance quickly on your enemies and clean up kills easier than you would imagine. Yes, there's more opportunity to die with a Tonfa since it is a 2-hit, but it's actually surprisingly usable. Now in zombies, this is your best melee weapon. Now this list is going from 10 to 1 specifically for multiplayer, but for you zombies fans, this 6th, 5th, and 4th spot are where it's at. The Tonfa is the number 1 best melee weapon in zombies. The next weapon at the number 5 spot is going to be the 2nd best, and the 4th spot is going to be the 3rd best. You got like a little reverse top 3 for zombies as we continue on here. But why is the Tonfa so good? Well, the Tonfa is one of 2 melee weapons with combo bonus damage. The way this works is the Tonfa is a 3-hit combo. So the first hit or a single hit deals little damage. It actually won't 1-hit kill a zombie in tier 1. The second hit will deal the same amount of damage, but that third hit will deal a ton of damage. A bare bones Tonfa without any damage or pack-a-punch upgrades will kill zombies in 1 to 2 combos. This includes tier 3 zombies. For those that haven't touched zombies, this is incredible. If you pack a punch it, you're going to be melting bosses like crazy with this. The Tonfa also boasts the fastest swing speed at 200 swings per minute, so when you upgrade this thing, it's just deleting bosses and chopping through hordes like butter. Next up at the number 5 spot, we have the Combat Knife. It's a fairly average melee weapon in multiplayer, has average swing speed, average movement, average time to kill, standard cone. It's just textbook average, nothing really much else to say about it there. In zombies, however, this is the only other melee weapon with bonus combo damage. But instead of being a 3-hit combo, the Combat Knife is a 2-hit combo. So one single hit will not kill a zombie in tier 1 just like the Tonfa does, but the 2-hit combo will kill tier 3 zombies in 4 hits without any upgrades whatsoever, which again, just to put things into perspective, all the other melee weapons would take dozens of hits to do this amount of damage, or more like 2 to 3 dozens of hits to actually kill a tier 3 zombie. The dual Kodachis are what I have next up at the number 4 spot. At first glance, it seems like your standard run-of-the-mill melee weapon, maybe even a bit below average, but it's at number 4 spot for multiplayer for a specific reason. It has a little niche in zombies as well. Firstly, the dual Kodachis have a slightly longer lunge range than average. It's also the only melee weapon with a reach range. And what that means is that in this game, you can melee early with the Kodachis and then close the distance and you'll still get a kill. If you try this with other melee weapons, you'll end up just whiffing the air. The dual Kodachis also has a very wide cone angle. So here's what I'm going to break down the cone angle for those of you that are unfamiliar, just so we're on the same page here. If you draw an imaginary cone in front of you, coming from your operator's belly button, anywhere within this cone is where you can trigger a melee and you'll end up actually auto-aiming and lunging towards your enemy. So the wider the cone, the more forgiving a melee weapon will feel. You have 3 tiers again. You have the narrow tier, which includes the Tonfa and the pickaxe. It's not that wide. The standard tier will look like this, and this includes the knives and the dual Kamas. The dual Kodachis, however, is actually in the wide tier. It's very forgiving. You can be this far off from your enemy from the left or the right, and you will end up getting a kill with this. So this large cone, the good range, the extended reach, it all works together to make the dual Kodachis a consistent feeling melee weapon. I get very little whiffs when I'm using this weapon. The only downside to this is that it has significantly slower movement speed. It actually is LMG level sprint speed, so you will need to pair this with movement perks like lightweight or double time to close the distance on your enemy. Without extra movement perks, you may struggle using these, but with them, the dual Kodachis actually feel very nice in multiplayer. Now in zombies, the Kodachis have a little niche carved out for it. Its swing speed will actually increase to 250 swings per minute when it's not pack-a-punch. And I don't know why this happens, but it's been a consistent thing for a few months, and you can spam the dual Kodachis like crazy. Once you pack-a-punch them, however, the swings per minute go back down to 130. So ideally, you're not pack-a-punching these, which does limit the dual Kodachis uses, but if you are sticking to tier 2 zones and have an epic or legendary damage rarity, the dual Kodachis actually puts in work, and you can chop your way out of sticky situations with ease. Again, once you do pack-a-punch the dual Kodachis, though, it acts like all the other melee weapons, and you're going to be better off using the Combat Knife or the Tonfa. So it does have a cool little niche that makes it stand out for zombies. But with that said, that pretty much wraps it up for melee weapons and zombies. Those are the only 3 melee weapons worth using. At the Tonfa at best, the Combat Knife at second, and then the dual Kodachis at third. Let's move on and finish out the top 3 for multiplayer. The third best melee weapon in this game is the Karambit. This essentially is your standard melee weapon, except it has the fastest movement speed in game, and it's been the go-to for fast movement in ranked play. The Karambit is what you want to equip if you're racing for positions in search and destroy, or trying to get to a sniping lane first, or get to an objective first, or whatever it is. If you need to move fast, the Karambit is it. This is balanced with a narrow cone angle, which makes the Karambit a bit harder to use, and the melee doesn't feel as great as some other weapons that are lower on this list. But keep in mind, the faster movement does in fact make meleeing easier. Once you get used to the Karambit's strengths and weaknesses, and you can minimize your whiffs, you can easily outperform other melee weapons and other players with the Karambit on. Runner up at the number 2 spot comes the Gladiator, a new weapon added in Season 3. I actually made a dedicated video on this bad boy comparing it directly to the Karambit because it's essentially the Karambit but slightly better. It actually shares the same movement speed as the Karambit, so the Gladiator is an alternative for moving as fast as possible. It has the same cone angle, but the Gladiator has better range than the Karambit. It actually has the second best lunge range in the game. It's in the middle of the Tonfa and the weapon at the number 1 spot. The Gladiator also has a better swing speed at 150 swings per minute, but it has the worst time to kill, clocking in at 300 milliseconds, which is like 50 milliseconds slower than average, I would say. As I've said before, the Gladiator feels great. It's spammable, it's quick, it's a standout melee weapon, but there are times where I feel like I die mid-lunge with it, and that is due to that slower time to kill. But I do think the goods outweigh the bads for this weapon, and it's well deserving of the second best title. That brings us to the number 1 spot, but a quick reminder, if you haven't dropped a like on this video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. I got a couple more worst to best and the worst for Modern Warfare 3, and I'd love to have you on board. Now, at the number 1 spot, the best melee weapon in this game is easily the Soulrender. This got added during Season 2, and there's just a lot of magnificent things going on for it, and it has a very useful niche. The Soulrender is essentially 2 melees in one. The left click is going to be your standard melee, but your right click will call the heavy melee. The heavy melee has like a 1.5-second wind-up animation before it will start a 1-second execution. Now, this isn't how you want to actually use the Soulrender. You want to left click with this primarily. If you end up right clicking all the time, it ends up being the slowest melee weapon in terms of swings per minute. Right click is most useful for Riot Shields. The Soulrender can actually slice through a Riot Shield user and kill them with the heavy melee right click. This is the only melee weapon that can do that. There's actually very few items in this game that even counter Riot Shield, so the heavy slash is a huge W for this weapon. Now, the left click or the standard melee, this will swing and kills pretty much at your standard average rate. It does have a greater than average lunge range at 2 meters, and it retains a respectable move speed. It comes in 4th place after the Karambit, Gladiator, and the Gutter Knife, which is still faster than SMGs and pistols and will have you closing distances on your enemy quickly. My favorite feature about the Soulrender, though, is the cone angle. Your left click is going to be a standard cone, but the right click, I call this the extreme tier. And you can see on the screen, this is incredibly wide. It makes the dual Kodachis look like the standard tier. So if you're like chasing someone who's moving all over the place, moving left to right, and you're like whiffing all your left clicks, you can just right click and call it a day and just let aim assist guide your lunge to the kill. So overall, I think this is a better than average melee weapon with a great ability, and I don't know about you, but I think it's the best. It feels great, and it is extremely fun to use. For you zombies players, the Soulrender unfortunately isn't anything special as far as I can tell in the zombies mode. Its damage is actually the same for the left and the right click, so there's no reason to use heavy melee against zombies, and the damage output is actually on the worst side. So if you're looking for zombies, use those 3 I highlighted towards the middle of this video. As always, though, you're welcome to leave your own worst to best list. That's my list. Maybe you disagree with me on a few melee weapons. If so, feel free to leave a comment. And again, please don't forget to tap that like button. Get subscribed to the channel, especially if you made your way all the way through this video. And thanks for watching. My name's D, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.